Hello, and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we kick off a retrospective dedicated to the films of Bela Lugosi, beginning with Lugosi's iconic star turn in the 1931 Dracula. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the upcoming Young Captain Nemo series from Fievel and Friends Macmillan Books. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. And also in Austin, writer of the long-running underground comic series Halloween Man, and and new this week, winner of the 2018 Best of Austin Award from the Austin Chronicle.
Woohoo!
This is Best of Austin Award for comic creators. Unbelievable. Drew Edwards. Hello.
I'm still getting. I had a whole Lugosi impression I was gonna do, and when you said that aloud, I'm like, my eyes rolled back up into my head, and I'm like, what
Yes.
award? Me?
Yes.
it feels good. It feels good. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. You are famous throughout Austin, which is a wonderful thing to be because Austin is a fairyland to begin with. So that is fabulous. Okay, and finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from the one and only attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello, Julia.
Every time you say it like that, I feel like it's a say, hola, ¿cómo están? ¿Cómo están? ¿Qué tal?
We were watching some of the Spanish Dracula, and you just want to walk around the house being Spanish Dracula because he's so badass, you know. And it's like, Senor Enfield. I love that guy. Anyway, okay.
So good.
He's fabuloso. Okay, Dracula. Man, I can't believe we've been doing this show for a few years now. We've never done Dracula.
I can believe it.
Dracula.
Oh, I
I-
can believe it.
I don't. I know people have pointed out that I say this all the time, but I'm still in awe. I swear to you, again, that like the Hadron Collider turned on and we got shifted into the timeline where we didn't do this, but we had in the past.
Yeah, I feel the
So
same way.
I'm glad we're
I feel the
rectifying
same
it
way.
now. But holy crap! Wow,
I think
don't get
Tony,
it,
I think
but-
you and I think you and I experienced a different timeline than they did.
Yeah.
I feel
Possible.
like this is my prize for winning Best of Austin, is getting to talk about Bela Lugosi for weeks and weeks and weeks.
It's
Awesome.
it is sort of funny. Yeah, and this is actually going to be a Bela Lugosi retrospective, and we were already. I think it totally does make sense to sort of celebrate your win with your favorite performer. But we were planning this for several weeks, and it's going to be awesome. All right, Dracula is a 1931 American pre-code vampire horror film directed by Todd Browning, starring Bela Lugosi as Count Dracula. Produced by Universal, the screenplay is based on the 1924 play Dracula by Hamilton Dean and John Balderston, which in turn is loosely based. I would say it actually does pretty well. Loosely based on the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. Okay, so we're gonna go Drew, Julia, Tony, and then I'll go opening thoughts. I probably will not have much to add. I'll just take us right into the conversation. So, guys, give us your opening thoughts. Drew, you go first. Dracula.
Well, before I go into my opening thoughts, I just want to state that I think it is appropriate that we are doing this movie mere weeks away from Bela Lugosi's birthday, what would have been Bela Lugosi's birthday, in mere days away from what would have been Bram Stoker's birthday. So happy belated birthday, fellas. This one's for you. Man, I love Bela Lugosi. He is one of my favorite, if not arguably my favorite, horror icon. But I haven't really watched, and by say that, like, I have watched this movie in recent years, but I don't know that I've really watched it in a studied sort of way. And in fact, I feel like I watched this movie 3 times this week, and I really made an effort to kind of come at it with fresh eyes. And something that I feel like that has happened a lot in recent years, and some of it deservedly so, particularly film critic and horror film historian David Skull has put out a lot of material, particularly about Dracula and a lot about this film. And a lot of what he has done throughout his reporting has pointed out, deservedly so, because no film should be removed from criticism, but pointed out a lot of the flaws in this movie, of which we can get into. There are flaws in this movie. But what I've noticed, and I don't think, for what it's worth, I don't think David Skull ever intended for this, but what I've noticed when I go to conventions and when I talk to horror fans, and some of which even happened to me today when I'm at a was at a horror event, is it's become kind of hip to bash on this movie and to really bump up other versions of Dracula ahead of this one. And I think some of that is fair because we all have our favorites. And indeed, I had kind of fallen into that. I've been like, oh, well, I love Bela Lugosi, but I really love him for Igor. Christopher Lee is my favorite Dracula. I started to kind of fall into the same thing. So in preparing for this, I really, I did my reading, of course, and I wanted to watch this. And man, like, this is for its flaws, which we will get into, and there are many, and we can talk about that. There is a lot to really appreciate this movie about. And, since this is a Bela Lugosi movie, I will start. Bela Lugosi is masterful as Dracula. Like, I don't think there has ever been a vampire performance that first of all, he does not seem like a human being, which, maybe only Max Schreck and Nosferatu is the only other actor who I can think has fully pulled off that hat trick. And he does it in a very different way. He's also so iconic that even people who try to distance themselves from Bela Lugosi only end up invoking him. And we even have actors as recent as Gary Oldman doing a Bela Lugosi voice, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
Because Bela Lugosi might not be the only Dracula, and he might not be, the best Dracula in everybody's mind. But I'm just going to say something controversial. He's probably the only Dracula that actually counts, because, no pun intended, Bela Lugosi is Dracula. And if you really watch this movie with fresh eyes and see what he does with his voice and does with his eyes and does with his body, this is an amazing performance. And there's a reason why we're still talking about it. And okay, but heaps of praise on Lugosi. There's other things going for this movie. The sets, the atmosphere, you have another almost untopped performance in Dwight Fry as Renfield, who is still creepy today. Like, he is still scary. Like, that is still a scary character. And I actually was racking my brain today. I don't know if he's ever been topped. And there's been a lot of really good Renfields. You have the prototype Van Helsing, who I don't think I ever quite appreciated Edward Van Sloan as much as when I watched this movie again this week. This movie is a wonderful film. It is a classic, and yes, it's flawed. There's things that aren't perfect about it. We can talk about that. But I just want to take a moment and point out, this is the prototype for all other vampire movies for a reason. There is a lot to appreciate here. And maybe instead of getting so wrapped up in your knee-jerk reaction of, oh, well, I like this version better. Oh, well, because I get it. You want to bump up the stuff that you feel like might not be getting appreciated as much, like the Hammer versions, like the Spanton of this film, like the stuff that might be getting lost in the cracks. That's fine. But tip your hat to this movie, because we wouldn't have a lot of the stuff that we have without this film. And on that note, I'll shut up, because I'm sure I'm going to ramble on a lot tonight.
That was a really great kickoff. I think that's a fabulous kickoff. So, wow. Okay. Let's go straight to Julia. What are your what are your opening thoughts on the 1931 Dracula? And have you ever seen it before?
Yeah, I saw it a long time ago with you. I actually think of this. It's funny because I think of Bela Lugosi's kind of Dracula even more than Christopher Lee when I think of Dracula. That's what I think of. And I've told this story before, but a million years ago when I was young and fit, we were at an event that Forrest J. Ackerman was at, and he was like, "This ring used to be Bela Lugosi's ring," and he gave it to me. And then, like a few weeks later, we were
Yeah.
reading in a magazine that Forrest J. Ackerman uses that line to pick up like young women. So I was like, "Oh, hey, all right then."
Yeah.
Anyway, no, I've always thought of Bela Lugosi as Dracula, and absolutely this is the reason for that, is that he's just perfect at it. I really like this film because, for the same reason I like so many of the old films that we do, and that is the practical effects and the mood and the atmosphere. I get that they didn't do music at the time because they didn't want to, sound was kind of new to the films, and they didn't want the audience to get confused about where the heck's that music coming from and why it's there. But, definitely to a person who's used to films nowadays, you kind of it's kind of weird to have these just silent, like him staring at people, and there's no sound at all. But I like it better than the Philip Glass fill-in music. That kind of is too much to me. So I don't know. Somewhere in between there would probably be good. But I love the practical effects. I love that they make, the effect of the coach, the horse, the horse led coach, or whatever you call it. I
Hmm.
can't think.
The horse-drawn carriage.
The horse-drawn carriage, thank you. The horse-drawn carriage on the road with the castle behind it is just made by painting a piece of glass with the castle scene, and then putting it over the camera lens, which I think is fantastic. Like, duh, that's brilliant. And why can't you just keep doing that now? Like, now we have to do everything computer because we can. But those things are just perfect. They're beautiful, and there's no reason why you can't have some films, not necessarily all of them, but some films that are going to be lower cost, because this movie was right after the stock market crash, so they're trying to save money, so they did a lot of things that were cutting costs. The cool spider web effects were like rubber cement. I mean, just
Hmm.
things like that where it's just neat. So I just really enjoy those things. I enjoy the mood. I enjoy, gosh, you're right, the Dwight Fry is just fantastic. He's so creepy. The shot of him when they discover him at the bottom of the stairs in the ship, and he's like the only living person left on the ship. I want to have a poster of that. Just love him just looking up with his eyes all crazy. Oh, it's fantastic. So yeah, I think there's a lot of neat things about it. It's definitely got some slow spots because of the time it was made in, but I enjoy it.
Fantastic. Tony, what are your thoughts?
I truly love this movie. I just got the Blu-ray box set that came out. It was on sale on Amazon. $70 for 30 movies, and watched the restoration. The Blu-ray looks fabulous. Oh, I can't recommend it enough. And it has, you could choose to opt in and out of the Philip Glass score. You can watch the Spanish version, which I think might be my new favorite version, with the exception of I still love Lugosi slightly more than I do the actor who plays Dracula in the Spanish version. But
Hmm.
I it pains me when Drew says that there's this cool, I'm gonna diss this movie hipster bullshit of, look, you should like what you like. If you don't like it, that's fine. But what I dislike is this idea of, I'm too cool for what people go for now.
Yeah.
Like, I know all this cool inside stuff. So the original thing, like Lugosi's hammy, blah blah blah. To me, and again, this is not against any one person. This is purely my reaction to kind of this aggregate of this kind of behavior.
Hmm.
What I think, those people are missing out on a lot of movies that, because of their time period, like, what is it in your brain that you can't appreciate a piece of art? You have this thing where this is contextualize this is coming off of silent film. So a lot of the actors, you'll notice, have a silent film, like their makeup is like that. Their acting is kind of a little bit
Certainly their hand gestures. There's a
and
lot of like
amplified.
silent. Yeah.
Right. So they're a lot of these things are amplified from a previous, or they'll have theater actors who act a little bit differently. There is no Franco. There is no like, not yet. But guess what? We don't freaking get that until you have this.
Yeah.
Like, this changes things. This changes horror. This changes performances. This iconic representation is the Count from Sesame Street that we grew up with.
Yeah.
Countless people with capes over their faces. Like, sure, if you don't like it and you think it's cheesy, fine, that's okay. But if you tell me that in person, I'm probably gonna want to change the subject
Yeah.
because I have little to no time for dealing with your inability to put yourself into a time period and see this as a seminal film full of some really great performances, even if they seem overacted or cheesy now. These are the performances of the time.
Mhm.
And there are reasons why this is so iconic. And
Well, and you can
it
enjoy it
just
too.
drives me nuts. Like again, these are my own thoughts. Like but I dislike, and also, by the way, you can like more than one thing.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't understand. Like, I like a lot of stuff. Maybe some of my friends think I like too much stuff. Like, I'm too easy on things. But that's just me. You can have another favorite Dracula and still realize how iconic this movie is and how iconic Bela Lugosi is
Yeah.
and what it spawned and what it changed in horror and what it changed in theater. And you don't have to diss a thing because another thing, especially in film isn't sports. Like, you don't
Yeah.
have the Kansas City Lugosis versus the Oakland Max Shreks. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way. You can like a myriad. There's a color palette as broad as Technicolor if you want to like things, right? And I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't get why, like, oh, it's hip to dislike this now all of a sudden. It baffles me. To Julia's point, though, the glass matte paintings, there's a really great part of the documentary that's on The Thing, with one of the matte painters who worked on The Thing, and he's painting on glass, and they show some of his previous work, as well as some amazing process shots in The Thing, of the snow, like where the spaceship is and stuff like that. I highly recommend that. And it is lost art because it's just so much cheaper and less unwieldy to paint on, just do digital matte paintings. But man, that guy's work is, the matte painting, and without this also, we don't have Castlevania. If you look at the castle,
Yeah.
like, so much pop culture relies on this movie. And if you're gonna diss this because it makes you feel superior, that you also like some obscure Spanish thing or Hammer gets short shrift, I don't know,
Yeah.
man.
I don't know that
I'm
we
not
can
on
really
that tip.
say. I don't know
I'm
that
not
we
on
can
that
really
tip.
say Hammer gets short shift anymore. I think Hammer
Well,
really
I mean,
gets
if
you
that's
anymore.
the thing, because you mentioned that, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I can't. I think this is great, and also there's on the way they restored this. I just loved it, and I love just. Yeah, and also
I'll
you
give
should
you
listen
another
to
example.
this
I'm sorry.
is you should also listen to the Ballad of Dwight Fry. I mean, here's a guy who, Alice Cooper makes a song about him. Melvin's covered it too, and the Melvin's cover is really good as well. But yeah,
That's a really good
I'm
endorsement.
I'm all about this version, and topping this out, like Universal's version of this. I'm totally down with this film.
What you're saying is really interesting because it reminds me of almost anything where you have a certain understanding of something. Like, let's say that we talk about superheroes a lot on the show because a lot of us are comic book fans, and in fact, we're all comic book people. And superheroes start out in bright primary colors, and then when you get a little more sophisticated, you start like branching out, and you're like, you're discovering all these like really interesting things, like Swamp Thing in the 1980s. And I think what often happens is that you come full circle where you totally dig Swamp Thing of the 1980s, but also you start like digging into some of those 1930s comics, and even with whatever flaws you might have, or whatever issues, you start wanting to take them in as part of the body of work, and even finding the beauty in them that you missed earlier when you were going through what I would think of as an adolescent phase where you're rejecting all the things that you loved when you were younger. I think David Scow totally would understand that. He writes these amazing books on the history of horror. He definitely will nitpick really deeply because he's going to, okay, for the next 400 pages, we're going to talk about the Universal Dracula. But at the bedrock of those films, I mean, of those books, is a deep love for the work itself. In other words, the only reason he's going so deep is because, look, he's decided he's going to spend this much time talking about Dracula. He wouldn't do that if he didn't love it. You
Sure.
know, it's the the baseline. But I really appreciate what you said. There's also, by the way, this wonderful video that people post occasionally. It's only about 19 seconds long, and it's a jingle called "It's okay to not like things, but don't be a dick about it." I think that's like that is that has become almost the entirety of my morality at this point is
Sure.
just please don't be a dick to people, you know, because you can go along with almost anything as long as we're being kind. Okay, so the funny thing is we sound awfully defensive, and we're not. But that's a wonderful place to start. That's that.
Well,
I think Drew's challenge is, hey, recently people have spent too much time at one level attacking this movie, but it's time to like re-explore it and see what there is to talk about. And by the way, Drew, I know you want to say something, but I just wanted to say we will definitely throughout this discussion keep talking. I will definitely be comparing it to other versions because it's my only way of understanding something is to compare it to other versions of something, be it the book or be it a different you know. But I completely agree with you and Tony that if that but for the universal version, you wouldn't have Christopher Lee because Christopher Lee's version is created as a response to the Lugosi
well,
version.
and he certainly wouldn't be dressed the way he was without
Right,
Absolutely.
right.
Without this incarnation of Dracula.
Right, and the version of that I love that that nevertheless, whenever anybody watches it, they fall asleep watching it because it's not a very certainly not a very interesting film, you know, but it's a wonderful coffee table book that moves on the TV screen when you play it. Is the 1970 Count Dracula? In that one, he is clad in black from head to foot. That is a thing borrowed from the book, right? But it is also you can't do that without people thinking in their mind, "Oh, how interesting and how different from Lugosi." Okay.
But what did
s-
he wear what he wears in the film when he was doing it on stage?
Yes, Bela Lugosi is wearing a variant of the opera costume that he wore on stage. Now that actually had been created for a prior actor. You know, but Lugosi wore it really well, and he was the one who wound up being awarded the film role.
And also, he's like, "Ha, it's mine now."
Yep.
Like
Yes,
from here on
it's
out, this is the Dracula.
it is like the symbiote costume because it will not only be something that he looks really great wearing, but it is something that he will not be able to peel off of his own skin, whether he wants to or not.
Well,
And
he was like
and
buried. He was buried in a black cape. Not this one,
Yeah.
but another one.
yes, he's like Leonard Nimoy and Spock. There is no escaping this role for Bela Lugosi. So let's talk first about Bela Lugosi in the role of Count Dracula. Drew, you gave us a little bit, and I want to hear your response. But let's start with somebody else. Tony, if I'm just a guy, if I'm a 14-year-old who's snuck into the theater in 1931, I got no money, I'm just coming into this theater because I know it's air conditioned. What the hell do I make of this guy playing Count Dracula? What are you thinking when you watch this?
I mean, I really do like that this Dracula, despite there are I get when some people say it's cheesy. Some of his reactions, like his reaction to the cross, is
Mm.
this super theatrical. But again, I think it comes from a lot of like stage acting and how you
Yeah.
have to play to the far seats. So, and
Well,
that's for better or
also
worse.
you
Go ahead.
talked about, this just coming off of sound and, like silent movies. There are actually some places where this was still a silent movie.
Sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Real.
And
Yeah, theaters that were not wired for sound got a silent version of this.
oh
That is
man, I would
fascinating.
like to see that restored. Like especially if there were title cards,
If
that'd be
that's
kind of cool.
true, I would love to see that film. A
There's
black
a
yeah.
brief recreation on the DVD, not a whole movie, but recreations of what it looked like on the documentary that's on the DVD set that I have, and I'll have to see if any of that's on the internet.
I'll
So
have to. I mean,
uh,
I got the Blu-ray one, so I'll have to double
I
check
would
for that.
imagine that
Yeah,
documentary is on there.
yeah. There's a
Wow.
few, and I didn't have a lot of time, but yeah. despite all of that, one thing that I love about this Dracula is it's back to what we say we like about this character, this malevolent force. He doesn't give a crap about humans. Like they're at best food and something to toy with. Hey, it's fun to hang out with them because look at their cool parties.
Yeah.
If I want to, I'm gonna bust up in your house and basically threaten you.
Yes.
By the way, I can just come in anytime. Your maids are in thrall. Your guards are nothing. I killed a woman on the street. I put this other person in thrall and set you up so that we know each other now. This is just me. I'm gonna have this
Question
dude
about
come from another land and let me lease this abbey, which I don't think is done that often. Like, who leases an abbey? The church is like, well, it's fine. I mean, I guess let's rent it out. Like next to the sanitarium. Just
I presume that it's been de-churchified. There's a
sure,
special word for that, but yes.
but he is all about just this sedate wreaking havoc. But what's also great is Lugosi also plays out that he is a count, that he is sophisticated. He begrudgingly gives credit to Van Helsing. He even when he's sometimes just lashes out, he's trying to keep it all civil because he's still nobility.
Yeah.
And I think that balance is pretty fantastic. Of course, it's not the Dracula from the book exactly, but a lot of the plague stuff is only hinted at. There's a lot of differences, but man, I really enjoy, especially and you gotta love where they do the like key light thing, this his eyes.
Sure.
And he hypnotizes people. Oh, it's
I
so
have
great.
a couple of things I want to say. One is I wanted to ask the question. Well, I'm going to say the second thing first. Um, the word you're looking for, Jason, is unconsecrated or deconsecrated, and
Thank you.
we actually looked. I actually looked that up the other day because we went to a restaurant that's in an old stone church. It's actually called like the Old Stone Church building, and the restaurants in there. And so I looked up whether they had to do anything to like unconsecrate it because it was clearly a Catholic church because it was like a confessional and everything. And no, it's just when you start using it for secular purpose, it just automatically is not consecrated. So my question for you guys is: in this film, to what extent is Dracula actually hypnotizing people before he bites them? And if he is in fact completely hypnotizing them, then why does the chick on the street, the one with the flowers, selling the flowers, scream? I mean, why would she scream if she's completely
Do you want my Marvel no prize answer? Or do you want my real answer?
Well,
I think the Marvel no prize answer is he hypnotizes her, but the trauma of being bitten snaps her out of it briefly so that she emits a last scream. I think the real answer is because even though she is hypnotized, it's more dramatic to cut with a scream than to cut with not a scream.
Oh,
Because
I think
otherwise, you just yeah. Go ahead.
plus it's a sound movie.
Right.
That's like a scream is what you put there to punctuate something bad has happened. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
the real choice is that
that's
is the extra
exactly
stab to
that's
it.
exactly the word that Jason used. It's
Right.
exactly the word Jason used. When we were watching the film, I said the same thing, and he goes, "It's so that we know that something bad has happened."
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
we're
super funny.
it's like a punctuation mark
Yes.
to I love that he just then is like, well, I did that, but now it's time to go visit my neighbors at the
At the
opera.
opera. Yes.
Um,
Go ahead, Drew.
so like much is made of before we get too far into this, I want to talk in particular the way the opening scene where he's having his meal with Renfield.
Yes, indeed.
Because I feel like this is really when we get to meet Dracula is when we see him in the castle.
And I think
And
those are the strongest parts of the movie. I
oh,
mean, I
absolutely.
think I
Great
think
stuff.
everybody would agree that the first half of this film is much more classic, and indispensable than the second
Top
half.
notch, that whole sequence.
Yeah.
A lot is made of the way Lugosi enunciates things.
Yeah.
And in fact, you always hear the story, and David Skull, who we've name dropped a lot, backs this story up. Is the reason why he enunciated things the way he did. evening, which is an
Yes.
misquoted thing. I never drink wine. A lot of a lot is made of that he learned his lines phonetically, which is
IMDb says it's not true.
well, that is actually like there's another book called The Monster Movies of Universal Studios by James L. Newbar that contradicts that. And by the time that he was in this movie, he actually did know English fairly well, but he kept up that appearance because it helped up his image as an exotic foreigner.
Right.
Was good for him, getting these kind of roles. My whole thing about his way of speaking is this is not a human being.
Yeah.
This is whether Lugosi intended it this way or not. However, he came to these decisions, because again, there's contradictions about that, and it's so far in the past now. Who knows? It makes seem like a space alien. Like, I question whether or not this version of Dracula was ever a human being.
Yeah.
Like, he has this, like, as Tony's saying, like, he's so above it all, but at the same time he's so magnetic. And it's actually like, for all the, like, there's like points where, as Tony's pointing out, that are very stagey, it's actually really easy to see why Lugosi did go on to become an early movie star, because unlike a lot of people who are in this movie, the camera fucking loves him.
Oh yeah.
Like that, the sequence where Renfield comes into this crumbling ruins of his castle and he's standing on the staircase.
Yeah.
Like, has there ever been a more elegant vampire in the history of film than Bela Lugosi in that brief moment? Like, he's beautiful to look at, and I sincerely mean that.
And
your
I love
statement that
how
he's a go ahead. Yeah.
I love how amused he is by humanity.
Yeah.
Like, Renfield comes in and he says these things, and Dracula, to Dracula, none of it matters
Right.
at all. And it hasn't for years. He lives in this crumbling castle because his surroundings, he doesn't have to care about them in the same way,
Well, David,
and also he's lost this like he's lost power, as if you go with that he's based on Vlad the Impaler, that he no longer has that power, but at one point he did, and he's like, well, things have changed, this is me now. And again, he goes back to there's worse things than dying for a human, and he says it as if he's keeping this facade of, hey, it's all good because I don't have to care. But when he says that, you realize, like, maybe he's had a few moments where he's like, what, maybe immortality isn't great.
Well, also,
but at least I'm going to rip it up.
he is not sensitive, really. There's things that he's very sensitive to. He knows when people are entranced by him, and when people, but there are things that he doesn't know or understand very well. He doesn't really have a really solid grasp on things you can talk about in polite society and not. The thing, to die, to be truly dead, that must be glorious. That's a whack thing to say. That's weird.
but it's
But
also profoundly sad.
Right.
true, it totally is. But I mean, imagine, a way of thinking of this idea. I love what you said about he's like a space alien. Imagine instead that he's a ventriloquist dummy who has, because what he is he is an animate piece of matter that is walking around in a cape, in an opera, in a penguin suit, basically, and he's just walking around, a hunk of wood, a piece of flesh that is able to somehow move air over his vocal cords and make words come out. And the words that he says are bizarre because he's a strange creature. And so when they go death, blah blah blah, and he's like, to die, to be dead, that must be truly glorious. This is a crazy creature that is saying that. I love that stuff. I mean, and yes, the business. He's also, by the way, a big old con artist. That's the other thing. I mean, yes, he's awkward, but he knows what he's doing. This whole thing. Hey, lawyer, I'm glad you came to visit me. You burned all the correspondence, right? Nobody knows you're here." And Renfield, who is an incredible dumbass, is just like, "Yeah."
I
'Cause
mean, you told me to, so sure.
I said to Jason, would you go to somebody under these circumstances who's told you, like, make sure nobody knows that you're coming? And he's like, yeah, probably.
Well, I want to.
No way, man.
I wouldn't.
I want to back it up even further than this, since we're
Yeah,
talking about Renfield. Renfield, we open up with Renfield in this carriage, and
yes,
they're talking about all this spooky shit. He's dropped off at first at this inn, and they're all talking about vampires, and they say that they believe there are vampires in the castle, which he's like pish posh. And this scene is by itself an incredibly influential scene. Like this beat
Oh yeah,
is
man.
still copied. Like I talk about this a lot, that the opening of the 1980 Friday the 13th is almost 4 beat the
yes.
opening of the 1931 Dracula. Like you still see movies copying this decades later. Renfield is a fool because like once he gets to the castle and all this uncomfortable stuff keeps happening,
Yeah,
he keeps going with it, but at the same time there's also a lot of humor here because like there's the whole business of like Renfield accidentally cutting his finger, and
yeah.
he has this cross on that the village woman gives to him, and it kind of comes out of his shirt when he's like holding like sucking on his wound, but Dracula's coming towards him and he sees the blood, and Dracula recoils, and Renfield thinks ironically that Dracula is recoiling from the sight of blood. And
Yeah.
that's
It's
funny.
great.
Like
Yeah.
that's really funny. That is, and I don't think the fact that that is humor that still works like this many years later. Like that's amazing to me.
There are some wonderful, so the costume bits we should mention. Like we said, the visual aspect of Dracula as seen here was completely invented for the stage and is carried over to this movie. I think Lugosi added the medallion, I'm not sure, but
Well, and
this.
Lugosi fought for this with Jack Pierce
Oh,
because,
really?
yeah, okay. So keep in mind, this version of Dracula that we ended up with, Universal did not want Lugosi, even though he had been extraordinarily successful as Dracula on the stage.
Hmm.
They were going to do a version with Lon Chaney Sr., the man of a thousand faces, who died,
Oh, yes.
and
Yeah.
then Lugosi fought tooth and nail for this part. And when he got it, the script for this movie calls for fangs, it calls for green skin, it calls for
Hmm.
something very different than the very slight makeup that
Yeah.
looks very much like the theatrical stage magician version of Dracula that we now all know. And again, I think it's kind of amazing that Lugosi conveys this sense of a lack of humanity so strongly without, basically he's just got pallor skin and dark lipstick on.
Well,
There's
it makes it more complicated
and
that
he never
he's
even
both.
has fangs.
Yeah, no, we don't see fangs. That's
Fangs are
right.
wide.
And clearly they could have done Fangs because London After Midnight featured Fangs. It's not difficult, or at least it's not impossible to do, to have done that. So these are choices, and so yeah, those are the aspects that make him more human than less. We were talking about the things just a second ago that make him less human, and that's what's special about the role is that he is trapped in a sort of walking netherworld of between mortality and immortality. And what is he doing with his time? That's another really interesting thing because you're so accustomed to watching this. It's like watching Hamlet or anything else that you know really well. You're so accustomed to it. In many ways, I don't remember exactly why anything actually happens before it actually happens. But Dracula's been there for a long time, and he wants to buy a house. He wants to lease, sorry, a house in London. We don't know why. I guess he wants to go to London because I mean, no, this is not a pun, but like there's fresh blood there. There's a new area that doesn't know him, don't know his reputation. He can just,
Yeah, 'cause
he
the
can
villagers
start
Those
over.
the villagers won't ever come to the castle, so he can't get them.
Right. Well, I just
Yeah,
wonder also if this is, how many times has he done this? Like,
right. That's a
has he
good
been to
question.
China? Has he been to Portugal?
Yeah.
Has he? I mean, it's entirely possible. He knows how he's not so alien that he doesn't know. I need to get a lawyer. That lawyer will procure my way. He's a
Yeah.
nobleman. He knows policy and civil discourse and all of these things. And so you wonder if this isn't is just like, man, I hear things are happening in London. Let's go check that out. I'll
Well,
Yeah.
also
get my 3 wives and we'll go, wreak some havoc. And well, it's a
Did they
lease,
go?
so
I
if
don't
I
think
can
where
break
they
it.
go. I don't think
I
he
don't
takes
think.
the wives.
Yeah,
Oh
as it
yeah,
happens, I think he leaves them behind.
that's
They're
right. Because the
probably. I
boxes are
guess they're.
just in case he
Yeah.
needs more dirt. Basically, that's right.
Did you notice, by the way, down in his crypt, the crypts are identical because I think they're the same sets, but he has a crypt in his own castle, and he has a crypt below the abbey that he buys, or leases. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that they keep referring to the fact that he's going to rent it, but
Unless you watch the Spanish version, in which case they do say that he buys it.
oh well, there you go. But you know, this the wacky stuff. There's not only his coffin and the three ladies' coffins, but there's a coffin with just some random skeletons in it, and there's a
So that's
tiny
the
little
little
coffin
yeah, for the bug.
that yeah, there's a beetle. I guess it's a
That's so
beetle
funny.
that has a coffin, and I'm wondering which of those wives has a sense of humor enough that she carved a teeny tiny little coffin for the beetle.
And
That
I
is
don't think that's
does
supposed
the
to be a
possum
teeny
have his
tiny coffin.
own? You don't think
I
so?
think that was a miniature that doesn't look
No, but it's
miniature.
the beetle size.
Yeah.
I
it's
think
it's
that's supposed to be an oversized beetle.
I also doubt, like, as if some of the nitpicks I can see people scoffing at is the number of armadillos. I think in Romania is probably slim to none. Also
I actually had
possums.
that conversation earlier this week,
yeah.
and they're like, "Why are there armadillos in Transylvania?" And I'm like, "This
Why
version of
not?
Transylvania, yeah, this version of Transylvania doesn't have anything to do with reality. This is
No,
Oh
that's
God.
what makes it amazing. Is
this
like,
is a
but
fantasy world."
strangely enough, the armadillos aren't in the Spanish version.
No,
Well,
that's right.
no, because Todd Browning had a weird preoccupation. That's a Todd Browning thing, and he had a weird preoccupation with armadillos,
It's funny.
and
What about possums?
the
Possum.
possums originated with him, but for some reason they carried over into the Spanish version and not the
Yeah.
not the armadillo.
The
You know,
cut,
I
the possum cut in the Spanish version though is way more clumsy. Poor
It's
guy.
hilarious.
right.
He just falls off a cliff.
Ah.
I
But
love the armadillos myself.
oh no, I think it's just so weird that it's kind of I don't again like you can scoff and be like armadillos in Eastern Europe. Oh, or you can just go, wow, how crazy is that?
exactly.
Dracula's castle has armadillos. What?
I have to say,
That's how
Tony,
I
and
like.
I think I'm safe saying this among you guys. 'Cause I've never heard you use this phrase, but honestly, anytime I hear somebody go, "Oh, I was enjoying it until they said or did or pronounced this or did that or armadillos showed up here, and that just took me right out of it." I'm like, "The fuck are you talking about? This is art. You
I have
can't
said
just
I have
take
said
it."
that. I have said that, but not about this. No,
I mean,
this
it's like saying
this
I was looking at this Andy Warhol painting and then I saw the colors were weird and it took me right out of it. It's a painting. This is a movie. This is
no.
art. I
I will
just have no.
argue that point with you when it makes more sense in that context. But right now, because I definitely have said that, and I think legitimately so. But in this case, I'm happy to think of it as like a Noah's Ark of dead animals, and he's just brought over like every. Maybe it's like he collects them whenever he travels the world. He collects animals that are
I,
from the native to those areas, and
I
then brings them back with him.
I love this idea. Like Dracula, like before he went to London, like he went to
Texas.
Texas, right? Or
Yeah, baby.
Arizona or Mexico,
Yeah.
anywhere, and was like, okay, hey wives, guess what? Have you ever seen one of these? Look at this thing.
It's like an armored possum. It's the
He's like,
coolest thing.
you remember when I brought you the possum? That was cool enough, right? But check this out.
I love
It's an
this theory.
armored possum.
Yeah.
Now we have some, and the wives are like, "Shh, I'm glad you travel because I would have never seen an armadillo before. But
Exactly.
cool in the gang. We have armadillos in the castle.
What's he gonna bring
How
from
cool
London?
is it to be a vampire now?
What's he gonna bring from London?
Yeah,
I
I
you
don't
know
know. I don't know. I mean, he's
It's a really,
already
it's a really solid question. Yeah, you're
from.
right. Bangers and mash, I guess. I really have
I mean,
no idea.
there's got to be something he can bring from the UK that's gonna be equivalent, but it's gonna be hard to top an armadillo
Yeah.
in Romania and Transylvania, right? Like that's a hard. I mean, I don't know how well they would do, but evidently they do well enough. There's at least two
No,
of
I
them.
think I think they're dead. I think that
Oh,
he
you
I
think
think
they're
they're
undead?
undead
they're all vampire
armadillos.
animals. I think
Oh
he bans
man,
the animals and then he brings them back, and then there's just this little undead Noah's Ark down there.
That's
that's
wonderful.
fascinating. I do want to know now. I want to see like Dracula's crazy ass like zoo, his
Hmm.
underground zoo. There's some kookaburras. I got an undead wallaby over there, and you're gonna. If the villagers ever come up there, they are gonna plot when they see the undead rhinoceros. Like, no one's
And
gonna believe
in the
that.
moat, he has like undead sharks and whales.
Oh
And
man. Oh, and from Hannibal, he's got like an undead elephant. They made it over the mountains just in time for me to store one in my crypt.
he rides an undead
Play
camel
us
around
out,
the
undead
backyard.
elephant.
He
Don't
rides his
step on the
undead
undead
camel.
armadillo. What now? Sorry.
He rides an undead camel around the backyard.
Oh
I
man.
I
I
I
love this idea now. Even though it's yeah. Yet again we digress, but I just have
I
no problem with this. Like, what do you do when you're hundreds and hundreds of years old? You
Yeah.
got to do something to amuse yourself.
no,
Evidently that thing
collecting
is
things makes total sense. I just wanted to mention that this concept of Transylvania, which is almost identical to the sort of whack ass weird world of crazy sets and superstitious peasants of the Frankenstein movies.
Mhm.
You know, think about this. This is like the universal Transylvania. This is the Transylvania that you and I, when we were little kids, thought of.
Oh sure.
It has nothing to do with
No.
Transylvania, by the way. It has nothing to do with anything.
No.
It's
No.
just just a magic word. And think about it, people
This
traveled a
might as
lot
well
less in
be
general. Go ahead.
this might as well be Middle Earth.
Absolutely. People traveled very much less in the 1930s. There's no air travel. People generally on vacations, you know what they would do? They would drive half an hour to a lake near where they lived, and they would rent a place and stay there all summer. The so, it there's not the same notion of, I wanted to be really true to what Rome is really like. No. This is just a wonderful dream of a dark world with weird gnarled trees and peasants who talk in Hungarian or whatever it is, and you know and I love it. And Scal, oh God, we're gonna keep talking about David Scal. But like he was the first one I read who posited that what this was a World War II, no, sorry, a World War One Americans weird fevered memory of Europe. Just a great big mashup of everything, just sort of thrown together.
Sure.
There's carriages and people in lederhosen and guys in gypsy hats, and all of it's just thrown together, and I love it. And so people will watch it. You're right. This is the same thing we'll complain about and go, gypsies aren't really, we don't even call them gypsies anymore. And I'm like, yes, I know. I'm sorry. That's one that I probably am trying much harder to be more sensitive to because it's actually an
Oh, of
ethnic
course.
ethnic thing.
Like I think
Yeah.
we shouldn't. And again, when I say like, oh, this may take you out or may not, there's no reason to excuse. I understand if people are like, wow, that was really bad back
Yeah.
then. This this level of racism or this just kind of being cool with X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And I get that. I still think that they're taking into context is important in these
Absolutely.
things. And if you don't want to watch that, and I totally get where you're like, I can't support this. That's
Yeah.
fine. I think again, you're missing some touchstones to our cinematic history.
Yeah.
But I get it, but yeah, I mean, it is just such a strange in these, especially in these earlier Universal
Yes.
pictures. It's such a strange place that again doesn't exist at all.
Yeah.
And now we can virtually tour this. There's so many pictures. So, everything's at your fingertips. but I'm sure there were many people who were like, there's a time period where people probably went to Transylvania, and I don't know, maybe they thought it was cooler. Maybe they were very disappointed that there was no, there
I should
wasn't a
mention that
giant crumbling castle on every hill and
Marv
gnarled trees.
Wolfman, in Tomb of Dracula magazine #1, I should just mention, you're exactly right, Tony, because Marv Wolfman features a bus tour of one of Dracula's castles and the disappointment of everybody at seeing a physical thing that doesn't quite correspond to the dream. And of course it doesn't. It's impossible for it to,
But it's
correspond.
painting.
And because
Or-
it's right.
well, that or like there were no 50-foot spider webs.
Right.
I mean, I
That
came
that
here.
staircase. This is an amazing set, by the way.
Oh,
Holy
it's
mackerel.
so fantastic.
It's
David
mind-blowing.
Small, I think, calls this castle "Religion in Ruins," and I
Fair enough.
think that's an appropriate description. It's very church-like.
Yes, it is. But there's also the things like the staircase, which remind me a lot of Franken. Remember how we were talking about how wacky the sets in Frankenstein were? Same thing. There's there's no human. The Spanish in the '60s, when they're doing all their horror, '60s and '70s, they just filmed in real castles, which gives you a very different feel because staircases tend to be a little cramped. Even grand staircases, there ain't nothing
Oh
like
man,
this
yeah.
thing. This thing that Dracula is standing on. This is an amazing fantasy, and it's
I
wonderful.
wish I
I,
could play in a club patterned after that staircase
hell
set.
yeah, it
Oh
makes you want to
man.
build one. Yes.
If I have Scrooge McDuck money,
You'd
I
have
Yeah.
to
think
have big
that's
liability insurance though, because the people would like die falling off that thing.
Right,
look,
because there's no.
if
there's,
if you have Scrooge McDuck money,
yeah.
that's the
Pay for
term
the
I always
lawyers.
use because it's just so much money that you can't possibly ever get rid of it, right?
Yeah.
You can swim in it. That's the measure of you have entirely too much money. So I
Yeah.
always use Scrooge McDuck money as the measure of I can just do whatever. Yeah, you have enough for liability insurance, or you have enough to pay for hush money, so the
Yes.
families of those people who fall off are taken care of, and you never hear anything in the news. It's like the people who die in Disney at Disney who don't really ever die at Disney. That
That's
kind
so
of
funny.
thing.
We've been talking about that actually because my daughter's a little. We like to watch those videos about people about accidents and things, and yeah, the idea that nobody ever dies at Disney because they don't get declared dead until they're off Disney property.
Yeah,
That's so creepy.
but but
So
yeah,
weird.
you can fix that. But going on to the further past this,
Yeah.
we should probably
No,
move it
we should
along
move on.
to Dracula, who enamors women all over the place. He doesn't seem that concerned that he's got wives. I guess once you have wives plural,
Girl.
I
But
guess
I
you
mean, they
just kind of
probably
think of
weren't
things
married like
differently.
in the church or anything.
Well, yeah. So
It's
once
probably
that's
more of like
happening,
a companionate thing.
yeah, he is very free with, but most of the women, I assume that there's a kind of like, look, I made you undead, you do what you want. The rest of the women I like, probably I'm just gonna drink their blood. Like they're not
Yeah.
coming back. So you're safe. What are you gonna do when you're away from Transylvania? It's all right. I'm always gonna come back,
Yes.
ladies.
Yeah. It
Like,
is
this is the
very.
kind of an impression you get that he's made them like they're taken care of, and then he's gonna
As
go
they're
do
undead.
whatever he's gonna do. Like, the rest of the world is his Vegas, basically.
Yep.
There's a very fairy tale-ish aspect to this whole sequence, at least at the second one. The second half of the film feels more like a mystery thriller in a sense,
Sure.
but the first half has just an extremely fairy tale aspect, including these three weird wives, weird sisters, whatever you want to call them. And they are, hang on, I'm sorry. uh yeah, because like the first thing that happened when my daughter looked at it, she said, oh, they seem a lot like the weird sisters of I don't even know what she was looking at. Macbeth, maybe. I don't know, but and I think, let's say that you don't even finish high school. There's nevertheless something very supernatural and strange and fairy tale-ish about the three sisters in their gowns, sort of coming towards them. By the way, let's talk really quickly about this other concept. I'm always wondering if it's there or if in our modern eyes we put it there. The sensuality of Dracula, when he says, "Get back, this man belongs to me," he's the one to bite Harker. Is there an erotic aspect to this, or is that postmodern
Well,
bullshit?
in this, it's not even said. Like when the Count goes to bite Renfield, it's silent,
Yeah.
and a lot of people have said that's because Browning was not quite comfortable with sound films, and
Mm.
maybe that was true. I don't know enough about Todd Browning to say that, one way or the other. I don't have an opinion on that. I think it's very evocative and sensual the way it does play out. I do think that is deliberate, and the sort of interplay between these two men in this sequence is
What
kind of homoerotic, and I doubt that was not intentional.
well, the
Whether
IMDb says that the studio actually they wouldn't let them have that because they didn't want Dracula to that they didn't have Dracula attack Renfield because they didn't want there to be a perceived gay subtext. So
But
they
he does
actually
attack
he
Renfield.
does attack Renfield.
yeah, but it says that they okay, well, so it's that they sent a memo to the director saying that he's only to attack women.
Interesting. So, well, they got away with it because but the camera pulls away,
Yeah.
but they do cut the line, which is "back, this man belongs to me." Now, if we're to understand that Dracula is kind of beyond everything, that he's sort of like he doesn't have the hots for anybody. He's basically, like I said, he's a reanimated hunk of flesh who's walking around and trying to figure out how to talk so that they don't over. He's a predator. He's like
Oh
an
yeah,
animal
he's a
predator.
ruiner. I mean,
Yeah.
he's willing to, and this is again, there's so many stories, and we've talked about this at length, where it's like, oh, it's a romantic thing. It's, he's looking for lost love. This Dracula's back to, he's willing to ruin whatever
Yeah.
because that's just what he does. Like
I
everything
I
at its heart is about Dracula.
I
Yes.
am gonna push back on this a little bit though,
Okay.
because this was released on Friday the 13th. It was pushed as a Valentine's Day date movie.
Mhm.
Lugosi himself did very much try to make Dracula sensual in his stage performance, and I'm sure that carried over into this. And indeed, women did find Bela
Sure.
Lugosi attractive.
I mean, I don't think that it's not sensual. I just think that the women that he attacks and kills, and the women that he's turned into vampires, there's not the same like, oh, it's love and therefore I do this.
Yeah, it
No,
doesn't go both
Everything
ways.
goes back to I'm Dracula, I do what the hell I want.
no, and
I
I'm
His
agree with the vampire.
sensuality, this image just his sensuality is essentially it is like the little light up appendage of an anglerfish. That's it. It's just a thing that he can turn on and attract people so he can eat them. That's it. I believe. I don't perceive that Dracula in this film is like, I got to get Mina out of here because she's going to complete me. There's nothing like that. It's just
I would beg to I
go crazy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't entirely disagree with you. I don't think Dracula is in love with Mina or Lucy or even the three vampire brides. I think they're basically a harem for
Right.
him.
Sure.
I do think there is a sort whatever is a vampire has, which is something different than a human being. I do think there is some sort of sexual need going on
Sure.
here.
Okay.
It's something
But
utterly
that doesn't have anything to do with love in this,
no.
like
I wouldn't
in
go.
many cases. I mean, we hope as humans and as married people, there is a certain amount of love. But in Dracula's case, the sensuality is not necessarily tied to love.
No,
Especially
I
in the
don't.
same way that it is in later movies.
I don't think it's love, or at least not love in any way we
Right.
would understand it, because his needs are very different than
Right.
ours.
Yeah.
I don't think I agree with what Jason is saying that he's just like a thing with no urge, like primal urges. Like I do think like Lugosi's Dracula seems to have a libido to
Mhm.
him.
Sure.
Which I think that's the whole reason why later Draculas have one, and they amped it up more, and I think they kind of missed the point. By the time we got around to Gary Oldman, we had a Dracula who's kind of milk toast in scenes and kind of falling all
Yeah.
over himself with Mina, and I think that kind of misses the point. Dracula is libido without consequence. He's libido
Yes.
without
Mhm.
morality. This is and this isn't quite the same as like Christopher Lee, who to me in some ways is sort of a rape fantasy.
Yeah.
I think this is a rape. I actually do feel like it's a rape fantasy because every time he comes near someone, it's more like to me, it's more like the Bill Cosby thing. It's like he's drugging these women and taking them as some kind of power thing. I mean, like part of it is to survive, but part of it's just to have the power. Because the fact is, when he looks at someone and hypnotizes them, that's the same as drugging, as drugging their drink. So I do
Yeah,
see it
sure.
as more of a rape
No,
thing.
that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. And that's an excellent point.
But if
I'm
you're a
just
predator, I'm trying to tease out the differences in what we're saying because I said he's basically a predator who is dragging people towards him with these various tools that he have. And if I understand your distinction, or rather your color on that is, yeah, but he really likes being a predator, and I think I'm down with that. I think I could go with what you're
Well,
saying.
also the
That
people he preys on some level, they are both repulsed
yeah,
by what they are becoming, but they also kind of dig it.
Oh
yeah,
yeah, well
well,
later
yeah,
on, she's like, "Oh, I feel great."
Well,
yes,
even
And
think
so
about how
that
conflicted
vampirism.
Renfield is, and I want to
Oh
get
yeah.
into Renfield
Okay,
in a
well,
Yeah, we
those are
second.
should.
2
We
different
should.
those are 2 different things, though, because you've got Renfield. Renfield is driven mad. I don't even think he's a vampire because he's eating, like, animals. So I think he's something else. He's something different.
let's talk
He's a
about
ser a
Renfield and
ser
let's
he's
talk
like a
about Mina. So
well,
yeah,
he's
Renfield. Go.
he's like a servant creature as opposed to a vampire, whereas when Mina is vamped, she's clearly feeling like all of the things that made her weak as a human are disappearing. And so
Right.
she doesn't have that it's a different thing. It's a completely different kind of victimization
Well,
in my
that's
opinion.
also part of, getting into Renfield. That's part of his tragedy and his why he's mad
Yeah,
is he sees himself as I know I can never be as great as my master, but
right.
I think I'm worthy of being at least what the wives were, or I think I am entitled to X amount of power.
Mhm.
And he's constantly trying to prove why he's worthy of that. So when he doesn't get that, and it finally really really dawns on him that he is nothing but a servant and he never will be anything but a servant, and Dracula kind of teases that along. That's again part of his madness, and it's even more tragic, is tasting this greatness but never being able to achieve it.
There
Yeah.
And
is there
it's
is something up with Renfield though. Like while he may not exactly be a vampire, there is something up with him because like the way when Van Helsing is studying his
Mhm.
blood, he notice there's something abnormal about his blood.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what I was saying though. He has a part of it, but not he realizes he'll never be the thing that he thought he was going to be once he was slightly changed, right? So
Yeah.
he's got a slight bit of this.
Well, he
And
also
that's
has guilt.
sure.
Yeah.
Like he
Yeah.
he veers back and forth between wanting to help the Van Helsing save Mina and wanting to be loyal to Dracula, which I
Mhm.
find him to be very fascinating in his conflict because he alternates between being super scary.
Oh
I
yeah.
I would actually say that Renfield, as much as I've talked up Lugosi, Dwight Fry is Renfield is probably the scariest thing in this movie to a contemporary audience.
Mhm.
Like
He's
this,
hilarious too. He has the best part of his scariness. It's like having a Hannibal Lecter who the weird thing about this, they have these wonderful, beautiful rooms like with with like balconies and everything right above an insane asylum, and this Hannibal Lecter guy, this super smart dude, this lawyer who's gone insane, has the ability to just sort of slip through every door, so he can just sort of wander around, drop in, say a funny line, they all turn around and go, Renfield, what the hell are you doing, like in the private like rooms, the private apartment of the rich people that live over this asylum.
Well, it's also because Dracula is busting him in and out of his cell. So,
Right.
I guess that's what is that the deal?
Dracula,
Dracula?
Yeah,
my
yeah.
my read on this has always been
Yeah.
Dracula has to be invited into the insane asylum because he's a
Okay.
vampire. So he has Renfield as his inside man. He gets Renfield out, and they're all hung up on what's going on with Renfield while he goes around and makes a snack out of Lucy and
Yeah.
Mina. Renfield, though, I was talking about this on social media earlier today.
Yeah.
The scene where he talks about Dracula nowadays, if this was a movie, if they were to just take the same script and film this now, they would show you this. Instead, we get this monologue. There's a monologue, and this is one of the reasons why I think Dwight Fry is so amazing in this film,
Hmm.
where he talks about Dracula appearing to him on this lawn and he promises me things, and he doesn't just promise them, he shows me. And he talks about all the eyes of these rats that Dracula makes appear, and he starts motioning with his hands, and he says in this lispy, whispery voice that he has, rats,
Yeah.
rats, thousands of them, millions of them. And we know at this point that he eats rats. So
Yeah.
like that is so fucking creepy.
Because rats
And
have blood, whereas
yeah,
bugs don't have blood, and so
it's so
he's
creepy, but it's also they don't show you, they just let him tell you. And it's
yeah.
so evocative. And again, it's another thing that is amazing about this movie. I am just in awe of Dwight Fry in this film.
No, he's
Well,
he's
again,
wonderful.
that's what also becomes more of the tragedy. He showed me all these rats. It's not, hey, you also can walk among humans and take what you want. He's
Yeah.
like, Dracula has promised him he's always going to be subservient. The best that Dracula has offered him is rats.
Isn't that
You know?
crazy?
And
Well,
Vermin.
that's again part of what, and he revels in it, but he also, as it progresses, is where he realizes like, but that's it.
yeah.
He's never gonna be more than a servant.
Well,
And
and he's
ah,
pathetic.
yeah, yeah,
He's oh, and his laugh, like the laugh, like
That's so wonderful.
Yeah.
it's I would have loved if somehow we could like pull him forward in time. I would love to see Dwight Fry play the Joker.
oh man, that would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, no. He would have been wonderful in that role. But this is, I first heard of this before I actually saw Dracula. I heard Bill Cosby doing his Renfield impression. So it entered the popular
Ironic.
culture, and because that laugh, and I think it compares. We had a conversation going on the Facebook page today. Who's the best Renfield? And I don't know if my favorite is Dwight Fry, but he is certainly iconic. Absolute.
Who is better?
Who is better? You know what? I would probably. My favorite is probably Dwight Fry, because what am I going to say? Klaus Kinski. I mean, he's boring as Renfield, and I find and Tom Waits is forgettable. I don't. There's I find all of the casting choices in the 1992 film just regrettable, actually. So I don't
I like Tom
understand.
Waits, but
Well, who doesn't love Tom Waits? But I mean, but
yeah,
as Renfield, I'm not crazy about it. It's
I
not
did
it's
really like the guy in the Spanish version though, but he's way more unhinged.
yes,
And not quite as
He's just
nuanced in
scary.
a lot of the ways, but I really do like how he takes it. Like it's a different take on how views of mental illness are as well, I think.
yeah,
But it's amazing. But yeah, Dwight Fry. I mean, and also he's so much more interesting than Jonathan. Like that guy
Oh my
just
God,
kind of,
yeah. Oh, he's a
he's doing his
cipher.
part.
Jonathan Harker has nothing to do in this movie.
Yeah, he's
You
just
know,
they're like, "Oh man, this is all," everybody else around him was like, "Hey, sorry about your fiance,
well,
boyfriend, or girlfriend, but like we're all going to take care of this." And he just kind of ambles because they even take away his role. They give it to Renfield, from the
yes.
book.
But
So
and that's
he doesn't
good.
even really
So
get that.
so that's a question actually that I want to switch to talking about Mina, but after that I want to talk about this question about why these choices are good or bad or okay or whatever. But like that's a good example. They've basically said, you know what, we don't have much room. Let's make Harker a much smaller role and give Harker's opening act stuff to Renfield, and that gives us a reason to have Renfield be crazy. And so people go, I want something that's close to the book. And having spent like the last 30 years of my life being fascinated by Dracula, I'm now coming to the conclusion like, do you really? Because maybe you don't. Maybe this is actually fine. And we should be changing some of these things for a movie that's going to run under 2 hours because I'm fine with this movie version where Renfield is the real estate guy instead of Jonathan Harker. Who cares? I'm actually coming to the point where I'm like, does the art work? And if the art works, I just don't care anymore.
Well, but
Whether
also this
I
version.
well,
yeah.
but I think that it's good to have Harker as the real estate agent because it's another creepy ass thing for Harker to encounter is Renfield. So like when Harker comes in, he's like, okay, that's creepy, that's weird, you're super crazy, but that's the only
Yeah, but
reason.
he
Otherwise,
doesn't.
I think it works great.
Renfield was back. Yeah, I mean, your point would be, but in Renfield, he doesn't encounter until he gets back to the sanitarium. So you have basically Renfield as he happens in this movie is what is just Harker. It's just the Harker story, and
So they
then
never have.
uh,
I thought Harker sees Renfield at the castle. He never does
nope.
in some of the
He sees
films.
no. He sees Renfield
Hmm.
at the sanitarium.
Yeah, then it
And
doesn't
now
make a difference.
Renfield did come from Renfield, if I understand correctly, somehow or another came from Dracula's land or something, and his his loved ones had been killed by Dracula. Blah 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 blah. But it's just vastly simplified. We're also missing all the suitors for Lucy because who cares if you want if you want to make a super long one you can do it, but these are just the choices that you can make. And so once upon a time I would have sniffed and been like, they shouldn't be changing the Harker story. Now I just realize, does it work? Do we get Glenn Fry being fascinating? Yes. Okay. um
It was
Oh,
Dwight
and
Fry.
oh, did I say Glenn Fry? I'm sorry.
Which is a totally different movie at that point.
who
Here's a little money now. Just do it just the way we planned. Play it cool for 20 hours and I'll pay you 20 grand. Yes. It is not Glenn Fry, it's
Also,
Dwight
which
Fry.
also does sound kind of like something a plot Dracula might have.
Oh my
Now,
god.
now I want to live in the universe of where there was Glenn Fry's Dracula. Just I don't know
I
what that
I
is
love that
exactly.
notion of the 1980s, like a Miami Vice 1980s colored. This is a bad idea. All right.
Never
So
mind.
okay, Mina, I
It-
love the voluptuousness of Mina and the sexuality because really it is impossible to watch this, and I don't care if you're in the 1930s or today. What's really going on is they're like, hey Mina, you're betrothed to Jonathan Harker, but you're clearly having a wild torrid affair with this foreign nobleman. Tell us that you're not. And she's like, I'm sorry, it's all true, you're going to have to leave me behind. Guilt, 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 sex, sex, sex. That's what this is, and it's great. I think it plays great. She's this actress. I've never paid attention to her before. Watching it this time, I was just struck by how well she's playing all of these different parts
I
of the
gotta say
story.
though, I vastly prefer all the women in the Spanish version. And it's funny
oh,
too because the woman who plays her part who plays Eva, they changed it to Eva. Does an
Mm.
intro in the Blu-ray, and she's like,
Yeah,
"Well, she says that she thought the English version was way more subdued, which it is.
yeah.
And B, she remarks about seeing her costumes versus the other costumes and going, whoa, well, actually, I guess it's Lucy, who's she's playing opposite of, but they kept putting me in way more. I forgot the term she used, but basically more risque.
Yes.
Outfit.
Well, sure. And they're more voluptuous for sure. Like the brides, for instance, in
Oh
the
yeah,
Spanish one they move more. There's more of a dancey kind of
sure.
erotic quality to them. Yeah, for sure. What can I say? That's the Latino thing, and it was headed for Spain and Mexico and Cuba and wherever it was going. So yeah, I don't know if the Hollywood guys audiences would have rejected a more voluptuous. Who knows? But yeah, that's totally true. Nevertheless, Helen Chandler, is playing the whole sexuality aspect of it. She's definitely playing the seduced, fallen woman, blah blah blah, and I was impressed by all of that stuff, and I never really thought about it before.
I think allegedly both her and David Manners, who played John Harker, did not. Well, David Manners definitely didn't think much of this movie. In fact, was very dismissive of it even into his old age.
Really?
But yeah, he claims that he never actually saw it into his entirety, which I don't know if I believe. But I think she does quite well in this. The Harker character is really boring, which is often a problem. That's a problem that continues into most subsequent adaptations of Dracula. Like Harker, like most versions of Dracula don't know how to make Jonathan Harker into an interesting protagonist.
Yeah.
So we have all these fascinating side characters in Dracula and Renfield, and I actually think Mina works pretty well for the time period. I do think that, and maybe Julia will disagree with me. I do see this as something that maybe like the sort of she's even compared to the Mina in the book, she's a little on she's not exactly exactly a strong heroine, and that she doesn't have the psychic connection to Dracula, which they play up in the book at the climax of the book. So she's not given as much to do. So I could see like why maybe to modern audiences, she's just a damsel in distress in some ways.
But
Yeah,
And
I think
I
she's
don't think
boring.
she's a damsel. I thought there was some voluptuousness to her, uh, as she's trying to seduce Harker because she wants to seduce him in the way that Dracula has seduced her. And then, like Renfield, she also is also struck with guilt and says, "Stay away from me. I've been corrupted." All that stuff is
I don't
is
think I think
cool
that's
stuff.
just her transition. I think that she is becoming a vampire, and so when she is kind of cluing into that fact, then she's going, "Oh, this is kind of cool." But then when her humanity is still kind of it's like when the films when they say there will be somebody in they'll say, whoever's inside of you needs to come out, so that
Yes,
this film that we were just watching today, with Uma Thurman, the dark what's it called, Jason? The Dark Hall, the
that was Down a Dark Hall.
Down Dark Hall. Yeah, I mean, there's a character in there who's being kind of possessed by the demon ghost, and so they're like, "Come on, you can fight it. You can come out." I think that's what's going on here. Is that she's still in there somewhere, and but the demon is kind of fighting to take control. But
It's
I honestly
yeah.
find her character really boring. I just there was nothing about her that I felt connected to at all.
It's hard to make her the character in the book is interesting, by the way, for what it's worth. She's she's really proud of how kind of modern she is, how much she can type and how clever she is and how she's not just boy crazy like Lucy. She's Mina is a plucky gal and interesting, and also she's much more sexually independent than the character here. I you know I- it's she's been simplified. Harker is boring because he's always boring. The only way Harker to make not boring, since he's the one who's being cuckolded, we despise Harker to begin with because it's much easier than being hurt for Harker. The only way to make Harker interesting would be to turn him into a bad guy, and nobody ever bothers to do that either. So Harker is just pathetic, and that's that's sad. Um,
Well, I mean, you
yeah,
could have him do more, take up arms more like Van Helsing, you know.
That's the
yes,
thing, though.
Like,
You would have to get rid of Van Helsing to do that.
or
Like
have Van Helsing die or something,
you have the angry Jonathan Harker and the Frank Langella Dracula
true.
from '79, and
Oh man,
he's a little bit more entertaining to watch, but I still wouldn't say like I have much sympathy for him.
yeah. Well, no, because that's not where the story's going. The story just simply isn't taking you down a path of spending time in Jonathan Harker's head. Um,
But I disagree that it
you know,
has to be that way because look at all the characters in the films that we just watched with with Loomis. It's like you have the Halloween movies, you don't have just Loomis and that's it. You have other people that are also fighting. So you don't have to
yeah.
have, Van Helsing be gone just for Harker to be strong. That's just not,
So
I don't
some
know. I think they
business,
just
oh, if
wasted
that's
him.
the case, no, it's a wise choice. You're right. And so basically, to make Harker interesting, you have to invent something about him that's interesting. Here, literally, he doesn't even have very many lines. He's just there's not much to Harker, and that's because they made Renfield, and it's a very clever idea to make Renfield what they did. Um, I wanted to briefly touch on Van Helsing a little bit more, and say that my favorite business with Van Helsing is when Dracula tries to use his, I called it the anglerfish trick. He tries to use his whammo on Van Helsing. I'm going to hold my gnarled hand towards you and make you come towards me. And Van Helsing sort of stubbornly refuses to be mind controlled. That's awesome. that's
Okay,
that's really
so Edward Van Sloan is Van Helsing,
yeah.
who had also played this role a lot on the stage opposite Lugosi. I don't think I ever have quite appreciated him enough because, like, you look at other people after this, like, because he's kind of the prototype for this kind of part. And when you get into the subsequent Universal monster movies, you even see Edward Van Sloan kind of playing echoes of Van
Yes.
Helsing. But like you have like Peter Cushing, who's flashier and more action hero, and
Yeah.
then you have later you have later on down the line, you have, Anthony Hopkins, who plays Van Helsing, is this batshit crazy mad scientist. A lot
Yes.
of the other Van Helsings are a lot flashier in some ways. I watched this movie and I really did try to watch it with newer eyes. I think I've really come around to liking him a lot with his sort of like he's eccentric but in a much quieter way, and he's
Yeah.
got big Coke bottle glasses and his weird sort of crew cut hairdo. And
Yeah.
I dig, you talk about how this is a lot like a drawing room mystery. Like
Yeah.
he does sort of function in that sort of Sherlock Holmes way where he's like kind of floating around and figuring things out and he's always two steps ahead of like the other characters. Like the only character that is ever even a little bit ahead of him is Dracula.
Yes.
And
That's
you know,
that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Like if you really want to see the business, that whole drawing room mystery sort of thing is when they figure out that Dracula is invisible in the mirror. And so Van Helsing sort of weasels Dracula into looking into the mirror to indicate I know that you're a demon walking around in this room. And by the way, have we ever stopped to think about and this yesterday was probably the first time I ever actually stopped to think about that. Drew, if you are in my living room here in Colorado and I turn around and look at a mirror and you are not in the mirror, that is a freak idea. That is a crazy idea, and I've never really stopped to think about it before because I just take it so for granted that that's what happens. But just think about it for a moment. How
I wanna make a statement about this.
yeah,
That is one of the reasons why it took so long to film Dracula properly,
mm,
because in the States, obviously we had Nosferatu, but up until a certain point, horror films were all about human monstrosities, like the Phantom of the Opera, the Hunchback of Notre Dame, or if they had anything supernatural in them, the supernatural aspects would be explained away by
Yeah.
the end of the film, almost like an episode of Scooby Doo. So Carl Limley, the founder of Universal, he wasn't sure if people would go for something like a guy not casting a reflection.
Yeah.
It was really Carl Limley Jr. who just loved like this sort of spooky shit that we're talking about, and it is such a freaky idea. And the only reason why we're more accepting of it is because it's now part of movie lore, because this movie made it part of that. But there were not enough vampire movies in 1931 to where that was an established thing. So like, the question you have a lot when we watch these old movies is like, man, I just don't understand how anybody could have been scared by this movie. Well, in 1931, the idea of someone not casting a reflection in a mirror was basically a new idea to a lot of people and would fuck with your head if you sat there and thought about it. Now
Yeah.
we think about it because we're so used to it. And
We
Sure.
don't think right. I had not actually I can
Well,
honestly say to you, I had not contemplated how weird that would be to look in the mirror and you're not there until like yesterday. And I've thought about it 1,000 times, but I've never actually physically experienced it.
but I
And
I think that we still have that. It's just that in a film like this, if you open a film today in a castle in Transylvania or in a a crypt or even a cemetery, you're going to be like, "Okay, I know what we're dealing with. We're going to have monsters, we're going to have creepy whatever." But when you have a show, for example, we've been watching Riverdale. I'm not a huge fan of Riverdale, but I'm watching Riverdale. And I'm just like, wait, are we getting into supernatural stuff now? Because that's weird. Like, it's not what I was expecting this to go, because that's not what kind of show this was supposed to be set up to be. And so, if we're getting into, like, I can't, this, I'm still trying to make sense of it and going, this can't actually be super. It must be that they have a drug, that they're seeing hallucinations, something, because I'm trying to make sense of it because it takes place sort of in our kind of world. However, there's also this other series that has to do with Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which takes place in the same kind of universe. So I keep telling myself, okay, well, maybe there's supernatural because presumably Sabrina also takes place in this universe. So there are supernatural things that happen. So, but I still to this day will watch things and go, no, 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 this takes place in my universe. Therefore, there are no vampires. Therefore, there are no monsters. And so if it shows up, I still go, whoa, wait, no, I did not see that coming. I thought for sure it was going to be drugs or hallucinations or insanity or something else. So I still think that works. It's just that we're so set up for castle in Transylvania means vampire,
mm,
or cemetery means zombie.
interesting. Uh Gosh, okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about fealty. I guess we've probably discussed it already. Is there anything else about fealty to the book that is worth mentioning? That while you're thinking about that, one that I will mention is that I used to be really into the concept of Vlad the Impaler being extremely important to the story of Dracula. And in my own version, which I wrote in comics, certainly Dracula had actually been Vlad the Impaler. But I am now pretty convinced that Bram Stoker did not have the first clue about Vlad the Impaler. He knew the name, that was about it. It was just a name, it was just a thing, any more than he knew anything about Transylvania. He was drawing from a whole bunch of stuff, which he had like a mile wide and an inch deep understanding of a whole bunch of things. That's not a critique. It's just saying if you're going looking for an explanation of different things and trying to find them in real world antecedents, there's only some. And they're not necessarily the same ones that you might imagine. But yes, Dracula is named after Vlad the Impaler. But did Bram Stoker understand anything about that guy? Probably not. is is where is where the research seems to be landing us now. Is that he only had the slightest understanding of what the
my
original
my
Dracula would have come out.
response to that is sort of like your response about, does it matter with when they adapt Dracula that they shift details around, which they do in just about every
Sure.
version. I don't think it does. I will say this: I have a really hard time imagining that Lugosi's version was Vlad the Impaler.
It's a really solid point.
No, I think he is my impression is always that he is the impression of a nobleman.
Yeah.
Like, not, we know he's a nobleman, but it doesn't go much further than that.
Right.
He's
Or do
important.
you think
He
of
was a
any-
nobleman he's big enough to have a castle.
Yeah.
He's feared, not just because he's a vampire, but that's the overwhelming fear now among the villagers. But certainly Lugosi is not, he's from the area, but not necessarily that particular person in history.
Well, there's the line, of course, at the beginning of the movie, "I am Dracula." And
Right.
to
Right.
me, there's the idea of Dracula as Vlad the Impaler, and I think that's important, and you can certainly do that. But I like this Dracula. I think I actually prefer this sort of classic movie Dracula that doesn't necessarily have to have that historical baggage to it.
Right.
Right.
There's a purity to that. I am Dracula. Why do you need to be anything other than Dracula? Being Dracula is amazing. And maybe I sound kind of maybe
Yeah.
I sound kind of off my rocker a little bit right now, but Lugosi is so mesmerizing that I don't, again, I really, really I just watched him so many
Yeah.
times this week. And I really have just become re-enamored with him, in a way that I don't think I felt since I was a child. Because this was the first vampire movie I ever saw. And
Yeah.
my God, he's so good in this part. So it doesn't matter. Yeah, okay. If you want to think that this Dracula is Vlad the Impaler in this movie, I guess it doesn't matter because there's nothing in the movie to contradict that. There's no line of dialogue that says one way or the other. But I don't think Universal was particularly concerned with that because to them,
Yeah. I don't think they were at all.
I think of it as like all these things that say inspired by true events, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or whatever. It'll be like, oh, hey, we heard about this guy who killed people with a chainsaw, so we're making a movie. We heard about this guy who had a cool name who would impale people, and that sounds kind of cool. So let's pretend that he's a vampire. I mean, I don't think it has to be any
I
more
mean,
real than
I
that.
think of it more that it's if I decide later to write something or you decide later to write something, coming at it from a different perspective, you look around for different things and you go, oh, well, that name traces back to this. But I will tell you, what you just said, that's even more than Bram Stoker knew. Bram Stoker wrote this book for what it's worth. Up until the very end, the character was called, and I'm not making this up, Count Vampire. And then as he was doing his research, he did come across the name of a nobleman, Dracula, and he said, "Well, that's an awesome name." And so he changed the character's name to Dracula, and so that's how we got Count Dracula. But
Count Vampire is
it's
the
yes,
sci-fi movie version.
Dracula.
Yeah, it's the
yes,
Atlantic Rim of
it's
vampire
the
movies.
what's that, the Asylum version? Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
and yeah,
I somehow
so he
don't
didn't.
think that would have done as well.
No, of
No. Well, the
course
name
not.
is a killer name. It is a killer. It is a fantastic name. Um, and so if I want to go and write something myself, I might go back to the source and go, oh, maybe I'm going to chase this name a little bit, or maybe I'm going to chase Transylvania, or maybe I'll chase the brides, or I'll do whatever I do to come up with a different angle to do my own thing. But it doesn't mean that it matters to this particular work. I just don't think it's just not a part of it. I don't know why I spent time on this. I just found that fascinating as I was looking at it. Uh, clearly there's a lot of changes from the book, but it's pretty strong. I mean, and the funny thing is, I believe if you think about that 1979 Dracula, which was also based on the same play, it's based even more on the play because they eliminate the whole first act where Harker slash Renfield goes to the castle. Um, in the 1979 version, we just open on the ship. Essentially, we open in the drawing room, and it become and everything, all of the action takes place going forward from that moment. I think if you lost those, you would have a much more. It'd be a. I mean, it's good stuff, but you'd be missing those images, those iconic images that really stay with you.
I
This movie. Yeah, go ahead.
For what it's worth, Jason, upon obtaining the rights to both the play and the book, which Universal had both,
Uh-huh.
they did originally intend on doing a version that was much closer to the book,
Hmm.
but when the stock market crash happened, they had to cut the budget on this, and it would have been cool to see that version. I think one wonders what that would have been like, with all the chase scenes and that kind of thing. But I'm perfectly happy with it.
Oh
Like
God, yes.
if I were to lobby a big complaint about this movie, it would be that the movie just sort of ends.
Oh yeah.
We don't really see like vampire version of Lucy is killed with a line of dialogue. Like
Mhm.
we don't get a scene of
It's
a
a
vampire.
really good point. My goodness, that's absolutely right. Yeah, we
You know,
barely
Speaking,
see the
speaking of
bloofer lady. You
speaking
know.
of ends, we should be wrapping this up because we've been going for a while here.
Yes. Yeah. So as we continue, if we do more Dracula stuff, we'll talk more about deviations from the book. But yes. Uh okay, so this is the beginning of our Bela Lugosi retrospective. Let's get our final thoughts on Dracula, but I guarantee you we will be able to return to thoughts on Dracula in the coming weeks because we'll be talking about other Lugosi stuff. So, what order? It was Drew, Julia, Tony, and then I'll go. Then we'll come around for endorsements. So, Drew, I hope we've given this film the kind of attention that you feel it deserves. I think we're getting there.
I
What are
mean,
your what are your final thoughts?
we could talk about this movie for hours because even though the movie itself is not that long, there is a lot of history here.
Mm,
There's a lot going on. I feel like we've given a lot of thought to this, so I think this is going to be a long episode. I think that's appropriate because we've held off on this. I was talking about this. I almost went into this, and was going to be my final thoughts. This was the first vampire movie I ever saw, and I was really enamored of it when I was a child. I watched this movie a lot, and I've probably seen this movie like a few hundred times in my lifetime. Like I've seen this movie a lot, and I just kind of got into myself where it was just something I would put on, and it was background noise, and I didn't appreciate it as much as I used to, and I didn't even really appreciate Lugosi in this role as I did because I'd come around to enjoying other movies that were perhaps less familiar than this one. I have explored this movie and really watched it in new ways this last week. And Lugosi as Dracula, I have found that romance of Dracula again this week, and Lugosi is come back around to being my favorite Dracula on
good.
film because I love that we have finally discussed this movie because I think it's an important film and a wonderful film, and I hope people who listen to this podcast, they really do, like, if they've been dismissive of it in recent years, they can hear what we've talked about it and maybe put aside some of the criticisms of recent years, some of which are very valid, and maybe come at it with eyes that can say, okay, while some of those things are true, let me explore what is excellent about this movie again and see why this helped usher in modern horror cinema and why this movie is a classic and why we are kicking off a retrospective on Bela Lugosi with this movie because this is a wonderful film and I just love that we finally got around to it. So I'm done.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Julia, Dracula, 1931.
Yeah, I think that some of the things that are missing in the film were actually cut. I'm trying to remember what it said about that they Universal. What was it? I don't know. There was a recut. Okay, Todd Browning was disappointed by the studio's 11th hour re-edit because the film Universal president Carl, how do you pronounce it? Lamley.
Limley.
Lemley said that the film gave him the heebie-jeebies and he wanted it to be re-edited, and so a lot of stuff was cut. Todd Browning said that his best work ended up in the editing room floor, and that the recut ended up creating all these continuity errors. I think I wonder if the original version would be less jarring because, like you say, we kind of just go, wait, what happened to Lucy? What happened to Mina? What happened to Lucy? What happened to, I don't know, whoever? There'll be different things where you just kind of go, that was weird. Like that person just disappeared, or we're suddenly here, or like, there's some things I would have liked to have seen. For example, on the ship, they used that footage that they took from a different film for the ship voyage. I would have liked to have just seen a couple little things where at least maybe some shadows of Dracula kind of over some people, whatever. I don't know. There's stuff like that would have made it feel more complete. So I do think that's part of maybe some of the people's concerns with this film. But like I've already said, I think that the atmosphere of it, I did giggle a lot whenever they kept coming back to Lugosi's eyes and with the pencil lights. At first it's cool, then it just kind of gets a little silly because you just keep having him staring at people. But that's the whole idea, is that they're creating this character and it works. So it's not perfect, but it's very enjoyable, very atmospheric, and as I said before, I love how all these old films use practical effects to to make do with what they had, and I wish that we hadn't lost that to the extent that we have, I think. But yeah, it's great, and I enjoyed the performances very much.
Wonderful. Tony, you thought that we had done this movie years ago, but this is our first time at it. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with Drew. This was the first vampire movie I saw. Definitely the first Dracula movie. There was a Marvel Dracula versus the Werewolf record that I checked out many, many times in the library when I was really, really young, kindergarten age, I believe. And even that had a Lugosi-esque read on that Dracula, even though it was a Marvel version. And I love it. Like I said, I love the restoration they've done to it on the Blu-ray, to the point where more and more I kind of wish I had gone back to school to do film restoration and learn that software. And I don't know if there's any way to go back and do that in Austin. Any way to apprentice without moving to LA, which I don't really want to do. But seeing that stuff and seeing how they went about putting this back together, I think Lugosi is great. Again, I don't understand really this backlash that luckily none of the people I know have had this, so I haven't had to deal with this in the real world the way that Drew has, and I'm fine never encountering that. I truly love this movie, and if you don't understand the history that this brings to it, and want to scoff at it or point out all the problems, and like, I don't know, I don't have time for that. And it's whatever. If you want to, that's fine, but I won't. We're in two mindsets, and I don't care to. You can go have your scoff session somewhere else. Am I
Well said.
like that's fine. You should like what you like, but I don't care to engage on that because it's a movie I really love. And if you don't, that's great, perfectly fine. But I think historically, it's an extremely important movie that pushes horror into a supernatural realm. There's great performances, even the kind of like boring performances, are of a time. There's kind of a lot of that in this era, this transition into, away from silent film and into the new era of talkies, and then from here to, eventually to color is a big deal. And this, paves the way for a lot of that horror, a lot of that starkness, a lot of the way that noir is thought of, I think comes from this, and how the contrast is, especially in the restored one. And it's especially with villains, like how do you film a villain who creeps in the night? Lugosi sets the stage for that a lot. A villain who can come into your house at any time and just tell you,
Yes.
hey, I'm a villain. I just do this. I'm gonna wreak havoc and cause chaos. But let's do this civilly. I get it, Van Helsing. You hate me, and I hate you. But at least you're, I get it. That kind of that kind of interaction is just great.
Oh, it's fabulous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
It's like Holmes and Moriarty to see
yeah,
them there in the drawing room together. Yes.
it's
Absolutely.
fantastic. Yeah, I truly love this movie, and I'm glad we're finally covering it. I just really, really dig it.
Fabulous. Thank you. My I I almost have nothing to add to that other than what a fabulous film to discuss. And in watching it, I discovered more things I loved about, and discussing it, I've thought about it even more. And I agree with Drew that we could probably discuss it all night, and wouldn't feel the worse for the wear. So thank you very, very much. Okay, let's get some endorsements, and then we'll be back next week with more Bela Lugosi. So starting with Drew. Drew, other than the issue of the Austin Chronicle that says that you're what did they call you? The best comic creator in Austin?
The best
Um,
comic creator in Austin, and it's cack as it sounds. The word genius was used in print.
Sweet. Sweet.
Uh, which again, I say with all due humility, I don't think I'm a genius, but thank you.
You got to put that on some like bookmarks or cards to hand out, and it'll just say Drew Edwards, genius.
Yeah,
That's a
super genius, like Wile E. Coyote.
um,
yes.
So I am going to, because we first of all, there are two books, Hollywood Gothic: The Tangled Web of Dracula from Novel to the Stage by David J. Scull, who we have
Mm,
name dropped what feels like a million times
yes.
in this episode. It is a wonderful book on all things Dracula, and a book that I revisited this last week when preparing for this episode. Who
I have to admit
has
I haven't read it. I'm excited to check it out. Go
Oh,
go.
you would love it. You'd love it. And another book, The Monster Movies of Universal Studios by James L. Newbar, also has an excellent recount of the history of Universal horror, and of course, Todd Browning's Dracula. And if you are a fan of vintage horror, both of these books are wonderful pieces of work with lots of information. They sometimes contradict each other,
Hmm.
which I would chalk up to first of all, differences in opinions about things, and also because all this stuff happened so long ago.
History
So
books contradict each other. That's one
yes,
of the first things you discover when you start reading a lot of history. Yeah.
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 So I highly recommend them both if you are also just getting into horror movie history. They're both really, really wonderful, and I will definitely continue to consult them as we dig further and further into Bela Lugosi. A lot, okay, so this is my other recommendation. A lot of reviews I have read of the chilling adventures of Sabrina have been negative, and I feel like I am watching an entirely different show than
Mm.
other people, because I watched it over Halloween week with my wife, and I find it to be a very atmospheric show that's extremely stylish. If you watch it for nothing else, enjoy how stylish it is, because it has got style to burn.
I think the sets are evocative, but I hate the way they lens. I just watched the first episode, and I absolutely feel that. I hope it gets better, but there was a lot of gimmicky focus stuff that just felt
The
ugh.
focus stuff was not my favorite, but as far like the sets and the costumes and
I'm with you there.
just the way everything looks, I'm super into it. Great cast, and honestly, I find it to be a deeply satirical and funny show. So I don't know why more reviews aren't talking about this is a show that uses Satanism
Yeah.
to poke fun at fundamentalist Christianity, which I
Can I
find
just point out that there's been a hilarious backlash on Facebook from people who are like Wiccans who feel, I am not making this shit up, Drew, who feel like they are being misrepresented by Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And I read that and I practically fell out of my chair. It it, it was the strangest thing to see people going, I would like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, but I just don't think that it's presenting witchcraft in a positive enough light.
Well,
And I was thinking,
Right.
maybe that's fair.
I
I
think that that's sort of valid, knowing friends of mine, and but I mean the same is often said about any. There's The Craft. There's been a ton of movies that just kind of people go, man, really? Like this
but
is
it to me it's like saying I watched James Bond and I feel like it's not making being an international spy look realistic.
Well,
It's
first of all, my rebuttal to that would be satanic witchcraft and Wicca are two different, two entirely
yes.
absolutely.
entirely different things. I Sabrina isn't particularly interested in a realistic look at. It's not a study, an actual study
Now
of.
you've entered the sentences that are the ones that make me fall over as you try to
I know people who practice witchcraft. Make of that
Sure.
what you will, Jason.
No, no,
Um,
no. I
but
agree with you completely. I'm just saying that
like
it's a television show on Netflix and yeah.
that, well, that's what
Okay.
I'm saying. Like, this isn't a history of the occult. It is
Yeah.
it meant to be a spooky show that is also funny, and I think it achieves that. And I think that the people it is poking fun at are actually Christians.
Right.
I firmly believe that, especially since it has such a gay sensibility about it, and I mean that in the best way possible. But wonderful show, in a lot of respects. Tony is correct that some of the shaky cam stuff is a bit tired, but other than that, like I recommend it. I think it's a fun show. And I think if you're into Amicus films, I think it does crib a lot. Nobody's talking about that. I think it cribs a lot from the look of old Amicus horror films from like the 60s.
By
So
the way, I
I
haven't seen
agree
it.
with that.
So if in fact it is
would
truly
like
offensive, I apologize.
I think you would like the aesthetic a lot, Jason.
I'm
Like,
I'm interested. I totally am. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
although
Uh,
I am a little like, as Julie was talking about, of course now we have to have an Archie cinematic universe. Everything has to have a cinematic universe.
yeah.
I have no interest in Riverdale whatsoever. I will probably never I will be very surprised if I ever get around to watching that.
I love
But
Riverdale.
I more
Yeah.
power to you. I just don't need the two things to be related.
Riverdale is a gothic soap opera. Nobody calls it that because nobody knows what that means anymore, but that's what it is. It's a gothic soap opera just as surely as King's Row was, and that's what it is. So, yep. It's not a particularly goth soap opera, but it's definitely a pretty gothic one. Tony, what do you got for us to endorse?
Let's see. Well, definitely it ties into this. I have been playing the re-release of Castlevania Symphony of the Night on the PS4. It also contains a classic that was only on the PSP, like the portable system, Rondo of Blood, which used to only be
Hmm.
for video game nerds on the TurboGrafx and 16 CD in Japan, of which I played on an emulator because I, couldn't get it any other way. But now you can play it on your PS4. You can listen to the original Japanese soundtrack, which is cool. Dracula sounds way better, in my opinion. In fact, most of the things sound better. And that's how I played it originally too. So I know a lot of people love the original dub, "Die monster," that kind of stuff, and I get it. But yeah, it looks great. It plays great. I have been enjoying the hell out of that. Although I am biased, I think I own like 5 different copies of that game. Because it was a huge deal at the time. Like, it was the step up in many ways was really great. Trying to think what else. There was something else and I can't remember it, but that's my my main one. I also highly recommend, if you can get the box set Blu-ray set of Universal monster movies. get that, and also watch the documentaries on there. And I want to cover it eventually, but the Spanish version of Dracula has definitely, I had never seen that version. I'd seen clips, like comparison clips off and on, but it does it for me. I mean, Lugosi is the power in the original, but I love so many things about the Spanish version. And there's a lot of the cuts, a lot of the dialogue that they've kind of tweaked, that makes it a little better, punches up things here and there. I really, really enjoyed it. So that was a great thing to kind of revisit both movies and see that one in its entirety. Fantastic.
Wonderful. My endorsement, actually, there's only one thing that I'll endorse this week, and it is a book that, if you're interested in more things about things that people have forgotten about Dracula, or misremembered or whatever, there's a really wonderful book called Dracula Sense and Nonsense by Elizabeth Miller. And so she spends like a whole chapter on the whole thing we were talking about it. Did Bram Stoker know anything about Vlad the Impaler? And by the way, the answer is essentially no. But, all kinds of stuff. And it's so eye-opening to me because it's heavily, heavily researched. It opened my eyes to stuff that I've just always sort of taken for granted, and I'll go, wow. And so it's really been wonderful as a companion to looking at this Dracula stuff. So that's Dracula Sense and Nonsense. I think it's on paperback. You can get it on Kindle. It's a good, good book. So I don't remember which Lugosi movie we're coming back with next week, but I know it's going to be good. In the meantime, if you enjoyed what you listened to, leave a review, play for your friends. And we're going to be talking about a lot of Bela Lugosi shows, so I hope you'll join us. And Julia, did you have any endorsements for us?
No, I don't really have anything to endorse this week. I've just been recovering from all the election craziness. Thanks for showing up, everybody. And but that's about it. Happy Veterans Day to those who have served or continue to serve our country. Thank you for your service.
Absolutely.
Excellent, excellent. And that's it. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you on the Facebook page, and we'll see you next week with more of the Bela Lugosi retrospective. Everyone, be kind to one another and have a fantastic week. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Good night.
Bye.